Did Anthony Casso's Godfather previously work for Al Capone? Let's check it out. I'm James Gladwish, and welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. Today, we're going to take a quick look at Salvatore Celembrino, the Genovese Crime Family Captain who once stated that he had previously been a wheelman for Al Capone. In Philip Carlo's entertaining but somewhat biased book, Gaspipe Confessions of a Mafia Boss, a biography of Anthony Casso, the author states that Casso's godfather was Genovese mobster Salvatore Celembrino. Although, in the book, Philip Carlo spells his name Calembrano. The book states, Anthony's father, Michael Casso, however, managed to prosper during these hard times. For his best friend, Sally Celembrino, Anthony's godfather was a respected capo in the Genovese crime family, and he had substantial influence on the nearby Brooklyn docks. It is interesting to note that, like many Italian names in Mafia history, there are multiple versions of how Celembrino's name was spelt, depending on the document that you read. So, what do we know about Salvatore Celembrino? According to research conducted by Polak Tony, one of the historians that features on the excellent Mob Archaeologists YouTube channel, Salvatore Celembrino, or Celembrino, depending if you're using the Americanized version, was born in 1903 in Brooklyn. Records indicate that his father was Augusto Celembrini. Augusto Celembrini's US naturalization papers state that he was born in Naples on the 30th of December 1882 and would live at 1452 Spruce Street in Chicago. He listed his occupation as a construction foreman. Whilst Salvatore Celembrino's father lived in Chicago, the rest of the family lived in New York. But, as we will see later, Salvatore Celembrino maintained some ties to Chicago. Salvatore Sally Celembrino would at some point be drawn to a life of crime and become associated with what we now call the Genovese crime family. In 1931, newspapers reported that Celembrino had sustained minor burns at a 4th of July celebration. One newspaper stated, Persico Frank, 23, of 11 Spring Street, Salvatore Celembrino, 27, of 396 Mulberry Street, and Gennaro Carbonaro, 23, of 238 Mulberry Street, sustained minor burns when one of them picked up a 5-inch firecracker lying in their path. Whether this is in fact the Salvatore Celembrino that we are discussing is unclear, but the age stated roughly matches how old Salvatore Celembrino would have been at that time. 2 years later, in 1933, it appears that Sally Celembrino entered an appeal against a 6-month jail sentence after he was picked up carrying a revolver. One newspaper reported, Springfield, Massachusetts, January 26. Appeal from a 6-month jail sentence for carrying a revolver was entered in District Court today by Salvatore Celembrino, 28, of 396 Broome Street, New York City. He was one of 5 men who came here to attend the funeral of Mrs. Pasqualina Miranda, murdered in her car by gangsters in November. It is unclear when exactly Salvatore Celembrino was inducted into Cosa Nostra, but by the 1950s he would be listed as a soldier under powerful captain Mike Miranda. Mike Miranda had a very large crew, which contained several future captains in the Genovese crime family. Members of Miranda's crew included the likes of Peter DeFeo, John Buster Ardito, Frank Funzi Tieri, Generoso della Duca, Lorenzo Brescia, Antonio Tony the Sheik Carillo, and Frank Cerano to name just a few. When Vito Genovese took control of the crime family in the late 1950s, he promoted Mike Miranda to the position of consigliere. Miranda's massive crew was split up, and several new acting captains were made with their own crews. These acting captains allegedly included Frank Funzi Tieri, Peter DeFeo, Frank Cerano, Antonio Tony the Sheikh Carillo, Generoso del Duca, and Salvatore Sally Celembrino. In 1960, an FBI file described Celembrino's importance with regards to the Genovese family's control of the rackets on the waterfront in Brooklyn. The file, which is reporting the funeral of Generoso del Duca, stated, "At the subject's funeral on 4/2/60, the first car was occupied by the subject's family, and the second car was occupied by Salvatore Celembrino. Inspector, redacted name, advised that Celembrino's presence in the second car is a good indication of his importance, and expressed his belief that such confirmed the previously reported information that Celembrino had been designated by Vito Genovese to take over Genovese's waterfront control while Genovese is absent in prison." Sources indicate that by early 1963, Sally Celembrino had been confirmed as an official captain. According to Philip Carlo's book Gaspipe, in 1961, a young Anthony Casso shot and wounded a man by the name of Bobby Bebop, who was the nephew of a mobster called Carmine Bovi. Bovi was a made man in the Genovese crime family. And, according to the book, it was Casso's godfather, Celembrino, who helped smooth the situation over and get Casso a pass. In 1963, a source revealed to the FBI that Celembrino owned a restaurant in Little Italy. The file states, source advised that on 4/23/63, he met with Jimmy Plumeri, Pete DeFeo, Eddie Buff, and Salvatore Celembrino, who is presently under investigation by this office in the Criminal Intelligence Program. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss pension loans. No firm conclusions were reached at the meeting. However, Celembrino told the source that he owns Patrice's restaurant on Mulberry Street and is currently having troubles with the Internal Revenue Service. Source has agreed to represent him in his tax matter. In 1964, another informant told the FBI that Sally Celembrino had assisted him with a problem that he had regarding a loan. The informant stated that he had approached a man by the name of Lenny Ciffone to facilitate a loan from the Teamsters Union Pension Fund. Lenny Ciffone was backed by the Mafia in Pittsburgh. As stated, Ciffone was supposed to get the loan from the Teamsters Pension Fund, but didn't do this, and advanced the loan to the informant out of his own pocket. Ciffone then consulted a lawyer to secure the return of the $10,000 loan. The use of a lawyer in such matters was against mob protocol. Genovese captain Sally Celembrino, along with mobster Eddie Lanzeri, then took the informant with them to Pittsburgh to sort the problem out. Celembrino, Lanzeri, and the informant then had a meeting with high-ranking Pittsburgh mobster Gabriel Kelly Mannarino. The FBI file states, the informant met Mannarino and was explaining the Detroit loan situation to him when Joe Seeker arrived at Rosa's house. Mannarino indicated to the informant that they would handle a settlement in this matter, and they were very upset with Ciffone for the manner in which he handled this deal, in that he hired a lawyer to attempt to get his money back rather than go through channels. As can be seen, Kelly Mannarino was angry that Lenny Ciffone had got a lawyer involved, rather than go through mob channels to secure the return of the $10,000 loan. The informant then told the FBI that Salvatore Celembrino's status as a made man and captain was quite apparent in the meeting, with how the likes of Mannarino spoke with him, in contrast to how the non-made men in the meeting were treated. The FBI file states, "Informant advised that at this time during the course of the conversation, it became apparent that Sally Celembrino was accepted by all of the individuals there as an equal and a close associate, but that himself and Eddie Lanzeri were more or less treated as outsiders. It should be noted that Sally Celembrino has been identified as a captain in the Vito Genovese family." After some further meetings in Pittsburgh and a dinner with Pittsburgh heavyweight John Rocca, Sally Celembrino and his colleagues then headed back to the airport to return to New York. It was on this journey that Salvatore Celembrino made the statement that he had once been connected with Al Capone. The FBI file reads, "After leaving Rosa's house, Sally Celembrino drove Lanzeri and the informant to the airport for a flight back to New York. Celembrino told the informant that he would drive the Cadillac back to New York since he liked to drive. He told the informant that he was a wheelman for Capone in Chicago and likes to keep in practice." This link between the Genovese crime family and Chicago is no surprise. Many sources state that the Chicago-based Al Capone was in fact a captain under New York boss Joe Masseria, and that the Chicago crime group had links to what we now call the Genovese crime family. As one FBI file states, "and explained to Capone the organization of the Mafia and the privileges of becoming part of the family. They elected him a capodecina, head of 10, with authority to select trusted followers. The 10 selected by Capone, even though they'd be in Chicago, would be subject to the family in New York, of which Masseria was capo. As far back as the 1920s, there were mobsters such as Anthony Tony Goebbels Ricci, who worked in Chicago at various times in his career, but was very much a member of what would become known as the Genovese crime family. It can be speculated that perhaps Genovese captain Sally Celembrino's comments about having been a wheelman for Capone is an indication of him being a New York mobster who worked in Chicago for Capone before coming back to New York. Salvatore Celembrino was very much involved with the unions and was a prominent figure linked with the International Longshoremen's Association. He was also involved with the Teamsters Union Pension Fund in the Midwest, and in 1969 he was indicted with regards to receiving kickbacks from a loan from the pension fund. Genovese captain Salvatore Sally Celembrino would pass away in 1971. Interestingly, his obituary seen here shows the spelling of his name as Calambrino with an A rather than an E. So perhaps this was his preferred spelling of his surname. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.